Hello, my name's Jackie Depelle and I'm going to share with you today ideas for researching your non-conformist ancestors. So my interest in non-conformists started with this place where I lived, and it's a Moravian settlement, which is a denomination you may not have heard of, and it was set up in 1754. And I'm going to share some of the records from this place in the talk today. So what is a non-conformist ancestor? So here we have the Dictionary of Genealogy by Fitzhugh, which is a really useful book to have on your shelf. And he describes as a non-conformist as those who do not wish to conform to the Church of England. You may find them called Puritans or dissenters prior to the 1662 Act of Uniformity. The term generally means Protestants, as you'll find Roman Catholics were often called recusants. You may see also other terminology like ranters, a ranter's burial ground, and that's an indication of non-conformity. Another indication might be the fact that you can't find your ancestors in the parish records, such as this lovely church down in Hampshire in England. So if they're not in there, what's your options? Well, why not have a look round on a map? And this is the Genealogist Map Explorer image. And in this town, we have the parish church up here. And if they're not in those records, where can we go? Well, we've got 4 other chapels. 3 are marked as such. The 4th one just on this corner says Sunday School. So does it have a chapel attached? We'll need to look into that. You may also notice at the top right hand side of this picture an almshouse. Now again, local history is invaluable. There were actually 2 sets of almshouses in this town, and they were both of different denominations. So it could be you might find your ancestors in an almshouse in the census, for example, and it could well be a clue to their denomination. Now the other picture I'm showing you here from a map is the fact that this church at the bottom left had a burial ground. So that indicates there may be stones to be found, of course. If the church didn't have its own burial ground, then where are you going to look? Well, first choice will be anywhere but the Anglican cemetery, but that might have been the only place they could go. If we look further forward in time to that plot of land, on the right hand side you can actually see that's now a housing estate. Those stones have gone somewhere else. I've had the remains of the people. They were actually interred, again, local history will tell you, and told me, they were interred into the main council cemetery. It may also be that your cemetery is very, very overgrown, as this left-hand picture of a Baptist cemetery shows. But that's been bought by friends fairly recently, and you can see there that they've cleaned it up, and now you can go on heritage tours regularly and learn about those Baptist people. Now sometimes, of course, there might be a special stone in that burial ground, and this Wesleyan Methodist Commonwealth War graves has stone, and I'm not sure about the remains, I have to say, but that's now been moved to a larger Commonwealth War graves cemetery because, again, the burial ground is lost. So just think outside the box. Another source that I'm always advocating is that people should use the archive collection guides. Some websites are easier to locate them than others, but in this case we can see that Guide 1 are parish registers, which of course are really popular, and the second guide are non-conformist records. If we have a little look at that, it's got a really nice intro. Again, what are non-conformists? So it's describing them as Protestants, Baptists, Methodists, Presbyterians, Independents, etc. And it tells us that by 1851, a quarter of the English population were non-conformists. So that's a large percent of people. And they didn't just stick to one denomination, they could actually move. Maybe it was a nicer Sunday school, or they preferred the minister, of course, or maybe there might be a young man or a young lady in the congregation that they rather had an eye on. It also mentions a magic date for non-conformist records, and that's 1754, and you need to make a note of that. It mentions that Quakers and Jews were exempt from the 1754 Marriage Act. It also goes on this useful Council Archive website handout to give us some key dates, and it helps me to think about who's on the throne. So Henry VIII really starts all the changes for his family history circumstances in 1534. And so by 1689 we've got the Toleration Act, which is beginning to open up opportunities, and people can be a little more open in their different worship. We've got Catholics who are registering themselves, and of course they may lose land in due course and their estates. And this date of 1754, with Quakers and Jews exempt from the terms of Lord Hardwicke's Marriage Act, and they were able to marry outside the Church of England. Now, by interpretation, of course, that means that everybody else has to marry in the Church of England. So if you do have Methodists, Catholic, Swedenborgs, Plymouth Brethren, Moravians, etc., they have to marry in the Church of England for a legal marriage. It's all about inheritance, but it's also about systems and the legality of marriage. So prior to this, there's some doubt about the legality of Catholic marriages, so this sorts it all out. So Hardwicke's Marriage Act made it illegal to marry without the publishing of bans or licenses, and it was aimed to also stop the quickie marriages, which were at the marriage shop. So these were a bit like Las Vegas. So the Fleet prison, as you can see on the screen, 50% of the London marriages were at the Fleet. These were defrocked ministers very often, who weren't too fussed about the situation, the legal situation of the bride and groom. He also introduced separate marriage books. So prior to this, we'd have had 3 entries in one books, and it also set up the system for bans. So that might be something else you can discover. They were all to be in licensed buildings, which you can see always were churches of England, and only Quakers and Jews were exempt. The dates continue. In 1791 we get Catholic Relief Act, and we'll see more Catholic records coming. They will be in Latin, of course, and by 1836, when we get civil registration coming, then we get registered places of worship. So you could get married in the registry office, and of course various reasons for that. So non-conformists tended not to keep registers. 1837 then we get a call for the records to be deposited with the Registrar General, and as you can see in 1961 these records were transferred to the National Archives, and that's an important fact to note. By 1898 then the Marriage Act gives non-conformists the right to ask the Registrar General to authorise a member of their congregation to act as Registrar of Marriages. So this authorised person would make returns, and there still be a duplicate at the chapel. So the Methodist denomination was keen to do this, and you will often see that they have their own people registering registrar acting as the legal entity at marriages. But something I've learnt fairly recently was up until 1857 there could be a religious element in a registry office marriage. So that might be another reason that people don't mind that, which as opposed to a church, etc.
We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like. To watch the extended, uninterrupted version, go to familyhistory.tv, link in the description. You will also find a host of talks from other experts on a variety of subjects. Don't forget to subscribe to get notified when these videos become available.